Hi, I recommend joining us at edtech10.nationaltrail.us if you're not already joining us on YouTube for the full video presentation of this podcast.
Hi, I'm Brian Poole, and the class today is about maximizing your instruction by using your digital whiteboard. Number one, it leads to increased student engagement in your lessons. You can do a lot of things with a digital whiteboard that is impossible to do with the chalkboard or to do with a just whiteboard. It gives opportunities for student engagement and interactive learning that you couldn't do any other way. It saves you time. Once you get used to using a digital whiteboard, you will realize how much time you save by using it on a daily basis. So that's a big plus for teachers because time is always a factor. And the last one, and what I'm going to connect with today, is it provides a way to GANAG your lessons and increase your instruction by using your digital whiteboard. Which leads to the question, what is GANAGing a lesson? High yield strategies are something that came out in 2001 in a book called Classroom Instructions That Work. Marzano was the key writer of this, and so he's been given kind of the credit for those high yield strategies. And what they are, there are a number of strategies that if you use them in your daily instruction, they increase the amount of learning and retention by your students. And this is that list of high yield strategies from greatest to least that he lists. There's more. But then what Jane Pollock did is she took those high yield strategies and turned it into a way to lesson plan. It's called GANAGing your lesson. And today we're going to talk about how you can use that interactive whiteboard to GANAG your lessons and easily create more effective lesson plans. And we're going to talk about that. So GANAG is an acronym. The first G stands for goal. So the first thing you want to do in any lesson is provide your students with the goal of that lesson. Using a digital whiteboard, you set them up in your lesson so it's the first slide so that as you move forward, the first thing you do every single lesson is to tell the students what we're trying to learn today. So if you use your digital whiteboard, you just add that as a slide. So that's the G for GANAG, providing the goal for the lesson. That gives a 23% increase in the amount of retention for your students, according to Marzano, on how effective your lesson is. A pretty big return on a pretty small investment. Now, the next one is the A for accessing prior knowledge. Before we get into what we want to teach them, first we need to activate their knowledge that's connected to what we're going to teach them. What do they already know that we can bring about in our lesson to make sure that we're more effective going forward? So that's what the accessing prior knowledge is about. Now, you can do that lots of ways, but with the digital whiteboard, you have some big advantages in the things that you can do when we talk about accessing prior knowledge. We finished the other day with talking about fragmentation and defragmenting the drive and the fact that my personal opinion of the Windows defragmenter is, so that's just an example of one of my classes. Because I've got all the notes and all the lessons in my digital whiteboard software, before I start on something new, I can go back and talk about what we already know, where we were yesterday, what we worked on last. So when it comes to accessing prior knowledge with the digital whiteboard, it's something you just can't do with anything else. You can't go back with your chalkboard. You can't go back with your traditional whiteboard. It allows you to access all previous classes that you've done, previous notes, and previous problems that you worked on in class. So accessing prior knowledge is something that you can do more easily with a digital whiteboard and allowing you to go back and access that information. So accessing prior knowledge engages the students and lets them feel already successful because we're talking about what we already know in our class. The next part is what we're used to teaching all the time. It's the new information, and teachers always know what they want to talk about that's new. Digital whiteboard lets us do some additional things when it comes to new information. Now there's different ways that we all teach that new information, but by using a digital whiteboard, we add some things and some abilities there. We add that ability to increase our engagement and to have some opportunities for interactive learning. Now, when it comes to digital whiteboards, You can inject guest instructors into your lesson, and I do that as often as I can because it perks students up and gets them listening, because now it's a new voice in our classroom. QLC. What's QLC, Mr. Poole? Well, you know what? Linus is back again to tell us what that is.
But the foundation of nearly every SSD, the NAND flash memory that actually stores your data, has actually gotten progressively worse.
So when we come to new information, we can do a lot of different things that we couldn't do before with the digital whiteboard. Number one, adds the ability to add all kinds of graphics to our presentation. Adds the ability to add videos directly into our presentation, and it allows us to interact with interactive websites, which many teachers already have a list of websites that are interactive that they can use in their classroom, but now you can call the students up to help them access that new information as well. A little side note, when it talks to graphics and video, students, actually all people, process graphics 60,000 times faster than text. So by adding graphical things into your lesson that are relevant, obviously you increase the ability of students to process that new information in your classroom. So again, leads to increased student engagement and that opportunity for interactive learning in your classroom. When we are done with our new information, what do we normally do after that? We apply the knowledge in our classroom. And applying knowledge doesn't have to be on a digital whiteboard. Obviously, that's when we're used to doing that practice of what we just learned. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with the traditional way that we do practice in our classrooms at all. However, there are things you can do with the traditional whiteboard that you can't do in a pen and ink situation. When I talk about digital whiteboards, I do want to point out that I'm not talking about anything in specific. Here, we use Smart Notebook or Smart Ink to interact with a PowerPoint or another application. However, whatever digital whiteboard software you have probably does the same kind of things. And you don't even have to have digital whiteboard software if you use Google Slides to present. Those are interactive with students. And the last one that many people don't know about is Google Jamboard, that I wanted to point out as well, because it adds a layer of interactivity that a lot of people don't know about. Jamboard is a part of the Google Suite that you can just click on. I've got an arrow pointing to it right there of what it looks like on your Google Suite. And it brings up something kind of like Google Slides that everyone in your class can write on at the same time. You could divide them up. You can have them do problems. You can call on students that are hybrid and home to do a problem that you have presenting on your board to the rest of your class at the same time. So it adds a layer of interactivity that you don't get anywhere else by using Jamboard. It's a great way to do that, apply knowledge with students not on site. So applying knowledge is kind of one of the biggest things that brings a lot of those key strategies together. And then the last one, it's called goal, because GANAG sounds better than using summary. But it's really summarizing that lesson that you just did, bringing it together, providing or getting feedback, self-assessments, exit cards from your students, to make sure that the thing that you taught is the thing that they learned, which is one of the great things about using student self-assessments in your class. When you talk about goals, you bring back that slide, those things that you wanted to talk about in that class, to make sure you hit what you said you wanted to hit, and everybody in the class understands that summary that you do at the end of the lesson. So that's the act of GANAGing with interactive whiteboard put in, and how you can use that to bring the two together to get more effective lesson plans. I do want to point out a couple other things, advantages of using a digital whiteboard. I've already pointed out that it increases time during your daily routine. The act of erasing your board versus just hitting a button and it's all clear, you will appreciate immediately. But the ability to go back and see what you did. And the second thing on here is the ability to have class notes available to students. It allows me to do collaboration projects that I couldn't do otherwise by using my digital whiteboard. And the last one I want to point out here is one of the things that if you've watched any of my lessons before, I'm big on recording classroom lessons. I've recorded every class I've taught since 2007, and every class is recorded and put on my class calendar. It's a subject of an entirely different lesson, but I'm big on doing that, and the only way to do it effectively so that students can read and see what you're doing is to use a digital whiteboard when you're doing that. I wanted to point out some of my references, especially the one with Jane Pollock here for Above and Beyond the Core. That handout that you keep seeing me come up to is on that website if you wanted to download that as well to take a look at her inputs on GANAGing. And obviously the book by Marzano I think is very effective to make teachers more effective in class. Hopefully you got from today the reasons I think you'll maximize your classroom time and instruction by using your digital whiteboard and by using it to GANAG your lessons to provide more effective lessons for your students. Brian Poole, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, and thanks for joining me today.